Welcome to the Buckeye Battle Cry Show with Brandon Held, a longtime diehard sports fan, especially Ohio State Buckeyes football. We have a lot on the show today, a lot of topics to cover. So I might move through some more rapidly than others just to minimize the size of the show. But today we're going to talk briefly about my feelings about the scum penalties, the ridiculous 2018 playoff tournament that the Big Ten is suggesting. Sonny Styles winning the Blocko recipient award, my post-game thoughts on our first big game of the year with K-State and Iowa State, my all-time Ohio State starting squad in honor of my son Bexton, who made this request, our weekly Scarlet Legends and Scarlet and Gray series that I will be doing every single week. And then I will be doing my preview and predictions of the top 5 games of the weekend coming up. And of course, Texas and Ohio State will be a part of that, the biggest game of them all. And then finally, I'm going to have a regular Instagram topic of the week that I will talk about to close the show. So let's get started. The NCAA brought down the penalties for scum
Ew.
last week. And, you know, it's pretty clear they aren't real penalties. $30 million, $20 to $30 million for a university like Michigan is practically nothing. It's basically nothing. So to punish Harbaugh and to punish, their head coach for one game next year, it's just not enough. It means the NCAA is worthless. They have no purpose in college football anymore. They're too slow. They take too long to deal out punishment. And there's just no reason to have the NCAA anymore. They overdid it for USC when they punished USC. They overdid it for Ohio State when they punished Ohio State. And so now they went the complete opposite way and didn't punish scum enough. So at this point, my feelings are the NCAA should just be abolished. The conferences should just police themselves. It's going to be better than what the NCAA is doing. The punishment will be quicker, maybe more severe, or at a very minimum, it will be equal across the board, which is something the NCAA can't seem to get right. So at this point, it's less about what they didn't do to scum, because that what's done is done, and more about just time to move on from the NCAA. It's time to get rid of them and let conferences regulate each other. And then, you can have one conference president from each conference become a committee, and then that committee can agree on things like college football tournaments, stuff like that. It can all be solved, but basically the NCAA is worthless at this point, is the point I'm trying to make. Speaking of playoffs, I'm a Big Ten guy, love the Big Ten, hate this idea they're floating around of a 2018 playoff to guarantee a certain number of Big Ten and SEC teams get into the tournament. It really, really belittles the season. And right now, the college football season, more than any other sport, has the highest value of season games, regular season games. And a 2018 playoff tournament would just ruin that. It would ruin that. There would be teams with 3, maybe even 4 losses because they're in the Big Ten or the SEC getting into a tournament for a shot at winning the national title. And that just shouldn't happen. Not only that, it diminishes the playoffs themselves. And can you imagine a 1 seed playing a 28 seed if they, ended up upsetting whoever they would play? That would be a demolishment of a game and not fun to watch. Keep it at 12. They may go to 14 or 16. Obviously, we don't have any control of that, but I like it at 12. I think it's perfect there. And I would love to see that not change. I want to say congratulations to Sonny Styles. He wins the Blocko recipient award. And for those of you that don't know, the Blocko Award is a prestigious award, prestigious jersey zero that he gets to wear, and that's recognized for demonstrating exceptional leadership, toughness, and high character, and only gets awarded to, one person per season. And that says a lot about Sonny Styles and what he's done and his commitment to the team and everything he's brought to the team. And so on top of that, he joins Caleb Downs, Austin Serveld, and Brandon Ennis as the captains of the team. So I also want to congratulate all 4 of them for being captains this year. And you don't become a captain easily, right? We know maybe the best player in the country is Jeremiah Smith, and he wasn't voted a captain. And that's not a knock on Jeremiah Smith. It's just simply a pat on the back to these other 4 guys on how hard they're working and showing leadership for the football team. So congratulations. Now I want to get into the biggest game, the only real game that mattered this weekend, in my opinion, and that was Kansas State versus Iowa State. Now, if you saw my first episode, my premiere episode last week, then you know I picked Kansas State to win the Big 12. They lost this game to Iowa State. And, that pick still isn't over. There's a very good chance, unless K-State collapses, which apparently seems to happen to the losing team that goes to Ireland, that they could meet again in the Big 12 championship game. But I do have some complaints about this game being played in Ireland. And first of all, I don't understand why K-State accepts this game, because it takes away a home game for them in the regular season. K-State was considered the home team in this game, and there was no home field advantage there at all for K-State. If anything, I think the Iowa State fans were louder. It's just a mismatch in as far as like K-State losing that home field advantage they would have gotten had they stayed in the States. That's kind of complaint number 1. Complaint number 2 is just playing this game in Ireland in an open stadium. That's a rainy part of the country. The grass is fairly tall. You could tell at least the first full quarter, players couldn't get their footing. Looked like Avery Johnson couldn't grip the ball or something. His passes were off target, behind receivers, overthrowing receivers. And it's just this. The point is this game could have been so much better on Kansas State's turf back in Manhattan, where the weather would have been better and the teams could have gone out and just played with what they're capable of doing instead of this constant slipping down and not able to get their footing. And I just would have liked to have seen the game played on a equal level where the best of each team would have been able to shine through. And I think that that isn't possible on this field in Ireland in that weather. So I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of how money is ruling sports and taking over sports. And that's why this game is played in Ireland. They're trying to expand college football. But let's be real, it's going to be hard for college football to take off in other countries because they don't go to our colleges. It doesn't mean the same thing to us. They're not from Kansas or Iowa or Ohio or Texas or where we're all from. Why our college football teams mean so much to us. To me, it's almost a futile effort. I understand why the NFL does it. I don't understand why college football is trying to do it. I think it's unnecessary and I think it hurts the game. And Avery Johnson was the better quarterback in this game. Um, he finished 21 of 30 for 273 passing yards. They had 383 total yards to Iowa State's 313 total yards, and Beck had 183 passing yards. But in the end, their offensive line and their ground game just wore K-State's defense down, and that was good enough to secure the victory. I still think Kansas State's the better team. I know you're going to say that doesn't make any sense. They just lost. Well, they lost in conditions that I don't believe benefited Kansas State, and I think greatly benefited Iowa State. So, congratulations to Iowa State for winning. Still think Kansas State's the better team. It came out in the news this week that the committee added strength of schedule metric and won't penalize teams for playing blockbuster games when selecting playoffs, rankings for the playoffs. And I like it. I think it's two great metrics to add and consider. A team like even Indiana last year, I'm a Big Ten guy, but let's be honest, Indiana's schedule was soft and weak last year. And the one playoff team that they played, Ohio State, they lost to. Everyone else they played didn't even make the playoffs. And Indiana's strength of schedule was super weak. Now, having said that, I already picked Illinois to make the playoffs because they do have a weak schedule as well. And if they don't beat teams like Ohio State, they may not make it in with a 1 or 2 loss season. So that's going to mess up my bracket a little bit, but that's all right. That I have a little asterisk because these rules came out after I made my playoff bracket, which frankly would have made it more difficult to make my playoff bracket because you don't know strength of schedule until the season plays out, right? Someone that you think is going to be really good this season and tough may have a bad year, a down year, take more losses, and someone you thought would look a little easier on the schedule may have a better year, and so that looks like a stronger win. So you can't really guess those things completely. You can have a good idea, but you can't guess them completely. And I also like the not penalizing teams for a blockbuster game. So when Ohio State and Texas play this weekend out of conference, big game, huge game, 1 versus 3, it's great that whoever loses, if it's close, right? Obviously, if Ohio State doesn't blow Texas out, then they're not going to penalize the loser of the game. But if a team gets blown out, then yeah, that's obviously still something you have to consider. Even though I think week 1 of the season, it still shouldn't hold that much weight because no team in week 11 or 12 is the same team they were in week 1. So let's just say, for argument's sake, Ohio State beats Texas by 21. Texas isn't going to be the same team in November that they were in the end of August. So, again, that argument is debatable for me. Time of season should matter for sure. You know, if Ohio State plays Texas week 8, okay, now it should hold a little more water if someone gets beat a little worse. But week 1, it's hard for me to say week 12 that game should hold the same weight because they're just not the same teams. So, in honor of my son, Bexton, he wanted to see me put together my all time Ohio State starting squad. And, I appreciate that. I appreciate him watching my show, and I appreciate him bringing me an idea that maybe others will enjoy as well. And so, let me preface this by saying, I didn't pick the quote unquote greatest players of all time. I just picked players I like and enjoy. And, if I was picking a squad to go out there and play, this would be my squad. I'm not saying it's the greatest squad you could put together for Ohio State. I'm not saying that because you'd have to go in the way back machine and get some players from the 20s to do stuff like that and 40s. I'm just talking about players that I watched play in my lifetime from the 80s on, and I really loved watching them play, and I want them to play on my team. So let's just start with the offense. So, I'm not going to explain too much here going into each player. It's self-explanatory, as I just said. Left tackle, no brainer, right? Orlando Pace, maybe the greatest college left tackle of all time. Left guard, Andrew Norwell. Center, Pat Elflein. Right guard, Billy Price. Right tackle, Corey Stringer, right? Offensive line, not sexy to pick, but vital to a team's success. And I'll take that offensive line all day, every day. At tight end, I loved him. So it's got to be Cade Stover for me. Cade could do it all. He could block, he could run and catch, he could do it all. So I love Cade Stover at tight end. Wide receiver, of course, the incomparable Marvin Harrison Jr. And the other wide receiver, almost no other position or no other time in life do you think you could be picking a current player for an all-time squad. But, Jeremiah Smith has to be considered for that. So Jeremiah Smith is my other wide receiver because he is the greatest wide receiver I've ever seen in college football, along with maybe Randy Moss. So Jeremiah Smith, Marvin Harrison at wide receiver. I wanted to pick 2 running backs because there's 2 guys that I really want to give props to and put on my team. And that's, of course, the Heisman winner, Eddie George. And the second one is Travion Henderson. I love Travion Henderson. He's a home run hitter. He's averaged 7 yards a carry last season. I mean, you just can't mess with Travion. Travion's amazing. So those are my starting running backs. And quarterback, this was a lot tougher. I really appreciate a lot of Ohio State quarterbacks, especially former Justin Fields. Had to consider him. Had to consider CJ Stroud. But when it came down to it, I had to pick the guy that beat Joe Burrow out, that basically made Joe Burrow transfer to LSU. and that's Dwayne Haskins. You know, he only played 1 year, but he was amazing for that 1 year. And you know, that would be my starting quarterback, and that is my starting offense. Let me know who you like in especially in the skill positions. Let me know what you think about my starting offense. I would take on any starting offense that you would pick with that offense. I know some people, how can you not pick Archie Griffin? He was two-time Heisman winner. Yeah, but I didn't see Archie Griffin play. And I'm going with guys that I enjoyed watching play. Now it's time for my defense. I mean, right end. I'm going Chase Young, defensive tackle. This is going a little bit in the Wayback Machine. Some of you may not remember him or know him. There was a guy, Big Daddy Dan Wilkinson. He was a beast at defensive tackle, and I haven't forgot him. And so he's one of my defensive tackles. Other defensive tackle, very recent, but he was a beast also when he played. And if he had this kind of squad around him, he would be an animal, and that's Tyleik Williams. You know, you can't double Tyleik Williams when you got Chase Young and Dan Wilkinson beside you. And oh, by the way, at left end, he's going to have Joey Bosa, right? That defensive line would kill pretty much any offensive line. And so I'll take it all day. Starting at linebacker, I didn't worry about doing weak side and strong side and middle. I just picked my three favorite linebackers of all time, period. And they are, as you should know at this point, my favorite linebacker of all time is the big cat, Andy Katzenmoyer. So he's definitely going to make my squad. The greatest Ohio State linebacker of all time is Chris Spielman. And you can't talk linebacker without talking Chris Spielman. And in third place, my other linebacker, this was tough, right? I could have went with Ryan Shazier, but I finally just went with AJ Hawk. AJ Hawk was a beast when he was a linebacker, and he's definitely one of the greatest linebackers in Ohio State history. So those are my three starting linebackers. My cornerbacks, some of you may not remember this first one, but he was just an unreal cornerback, and his name was Sean Springs. So I'll take him as a lockdown cornerback, and locking down the other side, I'm going to have Jeff Okudah. You know, there's a lot of options at cornerback for Ohio State, a lot to choose from. And it wasn't easy to pick just those two, to stop at those two. I even thought about going into nickel defense to add another cornerback, but we're just going to do a traditional 4-3 defense, and there are just two cornerbacks in that setup. So Sean Springs, Jeff Okudah, and then safeties, two greatest safeties all time, in my opinion. Free safety, you got Caleb Downs, right? He's a generational player, still on the team. You know, hard to believe you're picking a player on the current roster as an all-time player, but you just do that with Caleb Downs because that's who he is. And then strong safety, I got big hitter, Mr. Do Everything, Mike Doss. Mike Doss was an absolute beast, and I got him at strong safety. So there you go. That's my starting all-time squad. Look at it. Let me know what you would do differently, who you would put in at different skill positions, or would you keep the same roster? Do you like that roster? Do you think that's a nice roster? Either way, let me know. I would love to hear other people's input and thoughts on their all-time starting squad. And now it's time for Legends in Scarlet and Gray. And this week's Legend in Scarlet and Gray, I wanted to give an ode to one of my favorite players who didn't make my all-time squad because I just couldn't look past Marvin Harrison Jr. or Jeremiah Smith, and that's Terry Glenn. And if I would have had a third receiver on the roster, it would have been Terry Glenn. And there are so many other receivers you could have put in the third place. You could have picked Egbuka. You could have picked Ted Ginn Jr., right? The list goes on. There could have been multiple players, but I would have put Terry Glenn. I love Terry Glenn. At the time that he played, he was incredible to me and stuck out in my mind as a wide receiver. In his career, in one season, he had 64 receptions, which is the third best single season in Ohio State history. He had 1,411 yards in that season, which at the time was the record for Ohio State. It's now third, but it was record breaking at the time. He has 17 receiving touchdowns in a single season, which is still an Ohio State record. He led the nation in yards per catch at 22 yards per catch and was fourth in yards per game in the nation. One game against Pittsburgh, he had 9 catches for 253 yards. Think about that. 9 for 253. If he had 10 for 253, that's 25 per catch. But he had 9, and he had 4 touchdowns. Plus, he had a rushing, punt, and kick return yardage totaling 315 all-purpose yards in that game. And then finally, he obviously won the Fred Biletnikoff Award as the best wide receiver in the country. And he was a consensus first-team All-American and first-team All-Big Ten. So Terry Glenn, if you don't know about him, look him up. That's this week's Legend in Scarlet and Gray. This week, we're doing our top 5 best games of the week and predictions for those games. And I'm going to save the best one for last, of course, because it's going to get a little more looked into than these first 4. The first 4, I'm just going to give my predictions. So one of the games, Alabama at Florida State. I don't think there's any surprise here. The fact that Alabama has to go to Florida State will help Florida State a little bit, but we just don't know what Florida State's going to be. It would be impossible to be as bad or worse than they were last year. So we do expect them to be better, but I also expect Alabama to be much better this year than they were last year. And they only had 3 losses last year. So clearly I'm picking Alabama to win this game. I'm not going to do scores because it doesn't really matter how close I am on the scores. I'm just doing straight up. I'm not betting. I don't do the over under. I don't do, negative points. I'm just talking about who's going to win the game. So I'll take Alabama over Florida State at Florida State. LSU at Clemson. Probably the second best game of the weekend, if we're being honest, right? I expect LSU to be much better this year, and I already predicted them to make the playoffs, but I also predicted Clemson to be the number 1 seed and go undefeated. It's a home game for Clemson. It's the first game of the season. Can LSU come in and beat them? Absolutely. Absolutely. The first game of the season, Urban Meyer said the best chance to upset a team is the first game of the season. And that's what LSU has right here. If they come in more prepared, more together, then they have a shot to beat Clemson. but I don't see that happen. And it's going to be a battle of the two best quarterbacks of the season, probably two guys that will be sitting in New York at the end of the season being considered for the Heisman Trophy, most likely. But I like Clemson to win this game. It's at home. I think Klubnik is going to be pretty incredible this year, and Clemson's team all around is just going to be much better. And I hate Clemson. I hate Clemson, but I have to be real about who they are and what they have. So probably the third best game is Notre Dame at Miami on Sunday. And this is a really, really tough one to pick because I think Miami's really talented and Carson Beck can come in there and be, he has a lot to prove after leaving Georgia in the season that he had last season. And he could come in there and be a world of fire with that Miami team. And Notre Dame, they have a new quarterback as well, but their new quarterback is not going to be as seasoned as Carson Beck. But of course, I like Marcus Freeman as a better coach and what he's doing. His coaching is the reason they made the national championship game last year, period. Not because of their talent, even though Jeremiah Love, probably the best running back in all of college football. If we're being honest, that dude's a freak athlete, just like Jeremiah Smith. Must be something with the name Jeremiah. Um, and this is one's really, really hard for me to pick. And honestly, I'm going to tell you, leading all the way up to this, I was leaning Notre Dame. But I'm going to do a last second switch right here, right now. And I'm going to say at home, fired up to prove to the world that they're serious. I'm going to pick Miami to win this game. Straight up, I don't know who are the favorites to win by what the point spread is, but I like Miami to win this game. All right. And then the fourth game, there wasn't a lot of great choices for the fourth game. So I just chose, since it's a Sunday game, Virginia Tech in South Carolina. It's at a quote unquote neutral site in the Georgia Dome, but obviously that's much closer for South Carolina fans. And I don't even think this is going to be close, to be honest with you. I think South Carolina is going to handle Virginia Tech pretty handily. Unless Virginia Tech just has a squad that I didn't see coming, I didn't expect them to have. So I have South Carolina by at least 2 touchdowns on this one. South Carolina over Virginia Tech. And now the big game, the game we've been waiting since the season ended last year to watch, since Ohio State hoisted the trophy and won the national championship. We've been looking for this game. And as a diehard Ohio State Buckeye fan, most of the offseason, I thought we just have too many pieces to replace, right? We had the best team in the country last year. We still lost 2 regular season games. Texas is going to have something to prove. And so all offseason, my mind was Texas is going to come into Columbus and beat us. Barely, right? A close game, I thought. And no matter who wins, nobody is blowing anyone out, despite what Texas think in the message boards. But as the summer has gone along, and I've really started seeing the way the coaching has come in and, helped with the offensive line, which I think is going to be a strength this year. I wouldn't have thought that 6 months ago. The secondary, the linebacking core, frankly, the only position that is a question mark to me, I'm not even worried about Julian Sayin at quarterback, is the defensive line. That's the only question mark to me for Ohio State. And Texas has their own question marks. Their offensive line is a question mark. So, and when you look, I looked at the numbers. Texas has 2 seniors on offense and 4 on defense, whereas Ohio State has 1 senior on offense and 3 on defense. So they have 2 extra seniors. But then when you get into juniors, and juniors matter, juniors count. Texas has 4 on offense and 4 on defense. And Ohio State has 6 juniors on offense and 6 juniors on defense. And when I looked at those numbers and thought about that, and then when I think about how you're including Jeremiah Smith as a sophomore who, doesn't even count as a veteran, right? But the best player in the country, and he's a sophomore, and you add that to the mix. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm going Ohio State. I think Ohio State is going to win this game. It's in Columbus. I know players wanted it to be a night game. A lot of people wanted it to be a primetime game. I get it. I live out on the West Coast. I'm a huge fan of big noon kickoffs. I love waking up in the morning on Saturday and at 9 a.m. getting an Ohio State football game. And I wouldn't want to wait all day for this game because I get anxiety. I get nervous when I have to wait all day for an Ohio State football game. I love that it's big noon kickoff. So I'm sorry I don't agree with those that don't want it to be. And I know the players don't, some of the players don't want it to be. And I respect that. They're the players and what they think should matter. As a fan, I love big noon kickoff. Sorry. Picking Ohio State to win this game. I think they can win this game. And Ohio State's going to be favored to win every game this season, every game. And that says a lot about their team, even though they're quote unquote reloading, right? So Ohio State over Texas. Now it's time for my Instagram topic of the week. This is how I'm going to close the show. I get on Instagram, I see college football stuff, and sometimes I think, well, this is worth talking about. And this week I had 2 things I wanted to talk about. One's an older thing, one's a current thing. And this one that you're seeing right now is Ohio State has been ranked in the preseason polls 37 straight times. So 37 years in a row, Ohio State has been ranked in the preseason polls. Now, while this number is astounding, frankly, I think it should be higher in my memory of Ohio State football. But apparently 38 years ago, we didn't have a good enough team to be ranked in the preseason polls. But as long as I can remember, every season we've been at the top of the Big Ten going into the season. But either way, it's an incredible streak. And I just definitely wanted to call this out for the consistency of the Ohio State Buckeye football program. And it says a lot for Buckeyes, and it gives you a lot to be proud of as an Ohio State fan. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, this was a little older, but I remembered that I had this in my phone that I took as a screenshot, and that is the top 10 most valuable college football programs in the country. Now, I don't know how they came up with these numbers or decided who was worth what, but number 1, Texas is 2.38 billion. Number 2 is Georgia at 1.92 billion, and number 3 is Ohio State at 1.9 billion. And then you could see the list here. Some may or may not surprise you. I don't know. I think Tennessee at number 9 surprises me a little bit because when I think of top 10 best college football programs of all time, I don't put Tennessee on that list. So that's maybe the only surprise. But I'm just curious your thoughts on this. Do you think Ohio State's the third best, third highest valuable program in talent, in value? It's hard for me to see that because it's already been proven Ohio State has the most fans in the country by lot, by millions. Um, and that is valuable, right? That's an increase in viewership, it's an increase in sponsorship, it's an increase in everything. So while I'm sure Texas and Georgia are up there, Ohio State has the most fans in the country. So I don't know where they get these numbers, but I just wanted to point that out and get your thoughts on Ohio State's valuation at $1.9 billion and number 3. That's going to be all for today's episode of the Buckeye Battle Cry Show. And next week, I'll be bringing you the post game analysis of not only Ohio State versus Texas, which is where I'll spend the majority of my time, but a few other games that I saw, probably the games I previewed and predicted today. Maybe another game stands out that was a really crazy game. Who knows? But just watch out for that. And then also, it will be a preview of Ohio State's week 2 game. And I will also pick the top 5 games of the week. And some weeks are definitely going to be much harder than others to find 5 good games worth picking on that aren't obvious no-brainers. But that's what I'm going to do every week. So thank you for watching the Buckeye Battle Cry Show, or listening if you're listening on podcast. Make sure you follow me on YouTube if you're listening on podcasts at the Buckeye Battle Cry Show. And if you like the show, please share and comment so the show can get out to more people and the YouTube algorithm will show people that this show is worth watching or listening to. So please comment, like, and subscribe. And until then, bleed scarlet and gray. Go Bucks.